the whole point of Easter Day, when Jesus came out of the tomb, is that this was the beginning of God's new world. It wasn't an example of something else. It was the reality around which everything else, if you like, gets organized. Because of who Jesus was, because of his announcement of God's kingdom, because of his dying for sinners on the cross, now God's new world can be launched. So in a sense, it's about dividing time down the middle. It's about saying up till that Easter, well, Jesus' ministry beforehand, yes, but Easter itself, up till then, the world is waiting. Now, something has happened as a result of which the world is a different place. Now, of course, just as it takes faith to believe that God did raise Jesus from the dead, because we know perfectly well, like everybody in the ancient world knew perfectly well, that dead people don't suddenly get up and walk about again. It takes faith and historical understanding to grasp that. But in the same way, it takes faith to believe, as we look out at the world, as we read the newspapers, as we watch the television, it takes faith to believe that what happened on Easter Day actually did launch God's new creation. And over the last 200 or 300 years, many thinkers in the Western world have done their best to rubbish that idea and to say, no, Christianity is part of the problem, is not part of the solution. But actually, as people are now, I think, beginning again to realize, I think of my friend, the historian Tom Holland, in his recent book, Dominion, that actually the Western world has been enormously shaped by Christianity. There was no such thing as a social conscience in the first century. Ancient Romans didn't wander around worrying about slavery, or worrying because different ethnic groups were getting a hard time, or worrying because of poor people on the street. That was obviously their fault. The whole idea of caring for the poor, of healthcare for everybody, of education for everybody, these were part of the deal for Jesus' followers from the beginning. And here's the thing. Because of Jesus' resurrection, they had a sense of a new power being unleashed into the world, which then came into them and through them, through the Holy Spirit, so that the resurrection and the Spirit go very closely together, that the new thing which happened at Easter gets implemented through the Spirit, through Jesus' followers. Of course, the Holy Spirit is working in 1,000 different ways elsewhere around the world, but particularly through Jesus' followers, making Jesus known as the healer, as the restorer, as the beginner of new things, as the reconciler. And so that idea of Easter as the great turning point of history, the moment when an enormous old door that people thought was locked forever swung open, and suddenly there is God's new world, and God saying, you're invited. Now come on with me.